Oh boy, looks like it's finally time to dunk on My Hero Academia. Well, at least that's what I would say, but this video is more about the people that ardently defend the show even if it does something wrong. Plus, this video is super late, and God forbid you try to criticize its mistakes lest the wrath of the fan base come down upon you. It really seems like the only kind of criticism allowed is when people on Twitter criticize Horikoshi for his sexual art of minors. Oh, of course, only the female characters. But we're getting into the weeds here. What I want to talk about is a very specific problem I had with episode 69. Nice.
If you were on Twitter around the time this episode came out, you might remember after the episode released, IGN wrote a review of the episode that wasn't well received.
I'll link it down below so you can read it yourself, but putting aside my thoughts of episodic reviews on non-episodic shows, I thought it was fine. It gave some valid opinion and criticism on the way the episode handled the content that it covered.
The article starts by saying, "The stakes are raised, but in a very uneventful and clunky way." And it's hard to argue against this without ignoring the events that happened in the episode.
The major misstep IGN took in releasing this review, and the only reason anybody talked about it on Twitter, is by calling the episode lackluster.
Reading the replies, it seems like no one actually took the time to read the article. Some of my favorite replies are this one where the user added IGN 3 times and replied directly to them, "Y'all just money hungry right now and My Hero is poppin'," and "Me no like words," angry emoji. Now, there is something to be said for people complaining about the lack of action from week to week, and I don't think there always needs to be action to create a compelling narrative.
Hell, my favorite arc of My Hero is the school festival arc, and it's honestly the only reason I'm still sticking around to watch the season instead of just solely sticking with the manga. However, nowhere in this review does it say that every episode needs to be action-packed every second, and honestly, I can't believe I'm actually defending IGN.
The last thing I want to say on the article is the misunderstanding that people seem to have with the word lackluster. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of lackluster is lacking in sheen, brilliance, or vitality, dull, mediocre. I've felt that almost the entire season has felt this way when compared to the manga.
I've yet to be given a solid reason as to why I should watch the adaptation when I've already read the source.
My favorite comments about this have to be claims that this is necessary to build up a narrative, which is what makes it a good episode, even though for most of the episode they were either sitting around a table discussing the plot or showing flashbacks that we as the viewer already knew. Action does not simply mean fighting, it means motion.
You know, I'm actually kind of glad that I waited to make this video because Mizusaki from Eizouken said it best.
It's why the end of the episode works so well. Aizawa comes up to Midoriya and puts his fist on his chest when he tells him he trusts him. This is a much more emotional action than if he simply would have stood there and told him the same thing. I'm not saying it's wrong to have characters sitting around a table at times, but if that's all the episode is, and there's no interesting camera work or conversation being had, what's the point of watching?
This whole sitting around a table discussing plot things is reminding me of one of anime's greatest episodes.
Sword Art Online 2, specifically the first half of the season, is bad. I'm not going to stand here and give you a full breakdown of why. If you want a full analysis, I'd recommend Digibro's videos on the topic. I'll link them down below. The most infamous scene from this season has to be the Exposition Cafe. This scene was disparaged because nothing happened visually while the plot was told to the viewer in plain terms.
Now you're gonna need to forgive me, but I have to quench my craving for numbers, even though I know it's not a measure of quality.
The actual Exposition Cafe starts 8 minutes and 52 seconds into the episode and ends at almost exactly 19 minutes without counting the short flashback that's used to transition to the final scene. This means there's a little over 10 minutes of pure exposition. However, most of this information is new to the viewer, and it sets up what's to come in the rest of the Gun Gale Online arc.
I'd honestly rather enter an inescapable death game than defend GGO, but there's some things it did right here.
The best thing it could have done was not give any flashback to Season 1, be it Sword Art Online or Alfheim Online, and it really didn't outside of visual flair and scene transition. The most the episode used the previous season for was during Asuna and Kazuto's date. The reason it doesn't need it is simply that everybody knows Season 1 given the worldwide success of the show, but if it was used right, it could be a quick refresher to those less invested in the series. It also doesn't rehash much of what happened at the beginning of the episode with Death Gun in the virtual cafe within the game, except for a very quick overview, as well as adding details that the viewer might not be able to ascertain from simply seeing the scene. It's incredibly important to not make the viewer feel dumb by rehashing the same information multiple times, especially if we are seeing scenes from earlier in the season, and this is only the 6th episode of the season so far. Yeah, I'm subtweeting my hero.
Many complained about the prolonged scene, myself included, but for what it was, it made sense. At least within the episode itself.
The only reason Kazuto stayed was because he was promised anything off the menu that he wanted, and he only stayed until he finished it. When he tried to leave, the man promised to let him order more, which was enough incentive to stay. It looked like a pretty nice place, so it makes sense that it was worth the conversation he was having. At least we had some decent and original visualizations of what was happening, no matter how stupid a bullet coming out of an Ethernet port is.
If we're going to be brutally honest about My Hero episode 69, it had many of the same problems this episode of Sword Art Online did, but in some cases, even worse.
The actual runtime of the heroes meeting is over 3 minutes longer, starting at 4:05 and not ending until 17:12. There are more breaks throughout to fend off the monotony of the scene, but many of them are unnecessary flashbacks of things that happened only a couple episodes ago, or unnecessary explanations of powers.
The most egregious of these goes to Eraserhead's explanation.
We already knew the basics of how his quirk works. He's able to stop someone else's quirk from manifesting, so we really didn't need a full breakdown of it. There was an extra 30 seconds of repeated explanation that was unnecessary to understand Eraserhead's abilities.
俺の抹消とはちょっと違うみたいですね。俺は個性を攻撃しているわけじゃないので。
This is all we need to understand, that his power acts as more of a gate to block the quirk rather than erasing the quirk in its entirety.
Not to mention the fact that we've seen him use his quirk countless times up to this point, and not once have the effects lasted longer than he has looked at the individual.
Another thing that irked me were the comments made by some of the other UA students sitting around the table, namely Tsuyu, Uraraka, and Kirishima.
They added nothing to the conversation, and Kirishima not being able to follow the conversation everyone was having didn't make much sense when you think about who he is.
He's an idiot, sure, but he can almost always follow hero talk.
Especially since he's experienced it firsthand, and we can assume Fat Gum told him at least a little about Tamaki. Kaminari is typically the one who's shown to be the complete idiot. It's almost as if Kirishima was filling in for the role of comic relief, since there wasn't a dedicated character for that during the scene.
And don't even try to pull the opening scene, as they have no idea what's going on either.
They were most likely told not to discuss anything with anyone, which is why they didn't discuss anything with each other, even though they all figured out pretty quickly they were going to the same place.
This is the best place to mention this, so I'll do so here, but I absolutely hate when a show repeats the same scene that was already in that episode.
When the show comes back after the eye catch or commercial bump, it will oftentimes replay exactly what happened right before. This is fine. It gets the viewer back into the swing of the episode very quickly, and that's all it's meant to do. What I hate is when there's a new scene, shot, whatever, in between the bump and that repeat shot, especially when it's as over the top as nobody watching the episode will have any problem understanding the clip without context, and giving it padding really rubs me the wrong way because it feels like it's setting up a new scene even though it's just going to repeat what we've already seen.
I know, it's a really personal gripe, but it's a huge pet peeve of mine.
It's amazing to me how people will call this episode of My Hero amazing, or shame this writer. Really, IGN as a whole, but I'm willing to give some the benefit of the doubt for not liking the episode as much as the rest of the season.
It is a lackluster episode, and it's something that could have been condensed further down to not take up a whole 24-minute time span.
There's very little in the way of character development outside of introducing Rocklock, reaffirming the conviction that Mirio and Midoriya have, as well as the slightly regressive writing for the UA first years. And it has the same structure as one of the most hated episodes of Sword Art Online 2, but in this case has been praised to death because it's the most popular title out right now.
Now, I don't want to make claims without backing it up with evidence, so let's go ahead and break down the structure of each of these episodes.
Both episodes start with the main characters going where they need to and meeting up with the one that called them together. For Kazuto's case, he's meeting up with Asuna and is telling her about the meeting he had in the Exposition Cafe. The UA first years are headed to the location for the heroes' meeting. After they arrive, they have long discussions involving plot. The main difference here is that, as the viewer, we know most of what's going down in the story of My Hero as we've seen it firsthand. There is some new information, such as how exactly Night Eye's quirk works and more detailed information on the Shie Hasaikai, but it mainly serves as a debriefing for the heroes and is redundant for the viewer. Most of the information in the episode of Sword Art 2 is new, but it gets overexplained and could have been shorter without any real loss of understanding, or told in a way to make it more interesting, such as Kazuto already playing the game and cutting in with small flashbacks of the meeting. A cliche example, but it works. Once the larger, more important meeting is done, our protagonists meet with smaller, more intimate groups that they are closer to and can discuss the situation in further detail. Kazuto with his wife, Asuna, and the first year students with the third years. Finally, the episode closes out with showing the new characters that are going to play major roles in this arc of the story. We get to see more of Eri and how she is treated by the Shie Hasaikai, and are introduced to Sinon, the legendary sniper in GGO.
While the structure of each episode is the same, it's possible that one does it better than the other. And in this case, I think My Hero episode 69 does the better job, but only slightly.
The story has been long coming, and there are more characters for the information to bounce off of and have a real discussion with, which adds variety to the monotony of the scene.
That being said, I think there were almost too many characters in the hero meeting.
I understand the intent was to make it feel like it was urgent, and they needed heroes from every area, but very few of the heroes outside of the main cast of the arc said anything during the meeting, and it felt like they were there simply to fill a seat in the room.
Like I said at the beginning, I am not here to dunk on My Hero Academia. I don't want to, nor do I think I can, but I do think it's important to look critically at what you like and acknowledge the flaws for what they are, rather than simply calling the work a masterpiece. It could deepen your understanding of the work, and even deepen your liking of the work, because you're able to fully appreciate the work as a whole, rather than selecting the parts that you just like.
Horikoshi has done wonders at writing characters and building the world of My Hero to be one of the best that we have in Shonen Jump currently, and I don't put the fault for this episode with him. The staff for the anime seemed to have decided to adapt the manga panel for panel without leaving anything out, and in this case, took exactly 2 chapters of content and put it into one episode. Because pacing for anime is set and manga is variable, it allows a scene like this to work better on the page rather than the screen.
My main goal with this video was to compare 2 episodes that I thought were extremely similar.
One that was hated beyond belief, Sword Art Online 2, Episode 1, and one that seemingly had no flaws based on the general consensus, My Hero Academia, Episode 69.
Maybe content really does rule and the structure of a thing doesn't matter, but if you go back and read reviews of SAO 2, you'll find that most people that enjoyed the story didn't like the way it was presented instead of not liking the actual content.
The story was crafted excellently. While it did have a slow start at first, the ending was satisfying. While the name seems unorthodox, guns in a show with a title called Sword Art Online? The arc actually deepens its mechanics in ways that are more profound than the original. The first few episodes highlight this by exposition and explaining, thanks to a young girl Kirito meets in-game named Sinon.
There are also those who liked the pacing of the season, though they are in the minority.
This is really good. The pace is the opposite to SAO 1. It's slow and takes its time to develop, but be prepared to see Sinon's ass a lot.
However, most people that already dislike SAO wrote off the story as being bad before even giving it a chance and put all their attention into clowning on it rather than looking at how the story was told, a much more important aspect in my opinion.
Escaped a game where you almost died and suffered psychological scars as a result? Well, why not jump into another one? The show has yet to get past episode 1 and has already proven that a room full of monkeys could write a better script. Sword Art Online's lackluster second offering begins with the initially promising and quickly disappointing Gun Gale Online, or GGO arc. After the events of the first season, Kirito is tasked with investigating the murder of several people within GGO, because, well, apparently a teenager is more capable than the police or a federal agent who has actually been trained in investigation. I just don't know that a young teenager who always playing video games is assigned to a murder investigation in a video game which it just has a ridiculous or dumb impression. Let me fix the problem. Because he is the main character. He is Gary Stu. So, he once again held onto the stage and met one heroine he hired to join Kirito's harem club.
Of course, I don't want to paint an incomplete picture by omitting those that did comment on both the story and the structure, such as Digibro, but they are far in the minority.
Arguably, the biggest flaw of the show is that the pacing is painfully slow. I'm not exaggerating. Each episode covers about 2 sentences worth of plot. It wouldn't be unreasonable for the first 4 episodes to be condensed into 1. Then we would be talking.
The reason I'm so harsh on My Hero is because I love the manga, and endless praise is worth nothing.
Seeing and learning from mistakes is how to get better, and by creating a mob mentality on Twitter where nobody is allowed to criticize something without a giant wave of people attacking and calling that person a dumbass is extremely stupid. We love to see praise of a show, but it's equally important to hear the criticisms in order to appreciate what you love even more.
Regardless, like what you want to like, dislike what you want to dislike. I'm just a man who makes anime videos for the internet. Your opinion really shouldn't be changed based on what I say. Oh, one last thing. IGN giving Pokemon a 9.3 has absolutely nothing to do with this review of My Hero Academia. Why is that a thought anybody had?